and I in the course talk a lot, well, Nicola does because she's the expert, talks a lot about values versus standards. And it's like being very, very driven on your values. So instead of, because standards can get unhealthy. If you're like, I have to do these things for this reason. If standards might be, I've got to eat perfectly in this way every day. Why? Oh, because I have to. Whereas values say, I want to perform the best I can. What is it I need to do to get there? And I kind of use that approach a lot, and I learned that just from rugby. So my advice to athletes often is, you might not yet know it, and that's why the course exists. You might not know it, but you have all of these tools that you just need to unlock. You just need to become aware of them, and you need to become empowered to and confident enough to just say, fuck it, this is who I am. And then what you need to do is just understand, is just do all the boring planning stuff and say, well, what am I interested in? Like, what kind of field do I want to go in? What do I value? What do I like doing? Oh, I like motivating people. Right, you might want to go into management. Oh, I like solving really complex problems. Right, we'll go over here and do that. So it's kind of, my message always is like, athletes have all this ability, and they've got all these huge toolboxes to access. And once they understand that, and they can find a bit of direction, they're absolutely flying. So yeah, I think that's an answer. I can't remember what the question was. I'm just blabbering.
No, that was awesome. What would you say, again, not naming names, but like, what has been some of the people where it's like, okay, hey, this person, or maybe what are some common themes or heuristics of those that have struggled with the transition? So that way, if anybody listening, they're like, oh man, like, kind of sounds like me. All right, like, if they're not aware enough of it because they're in that matrix, what are some of those?
I think like there's some really tangible stuff like job hopping. So like if you leave and you just fall into an industry because you've got a contact that got you in somewhere, and then you do a year or two and you're like, just a bit bored. Like, what do I do now? Like, it's a really obvious sign, but that's often a sign of discontent because you've gone from doing a thing that you love all the time, being really motivated, and then you're being hit by not being motivated, and that's like a big diversion from what you're used to. And I think like the biggest warning sign I always see is there's people telling you that it's like, you'll ask like, oh, how's work or whatever. Like they say they've already transitioned you. How's the job or whatever. And the biggest like telltale is they'll just go, oh, fine. It's like, is it? Because like when you're a professional athlete, if you're like, what's it like being a professional athlete? I'll be like, it's my dream. And so if you go from being like, it's my dream to, yeah, then I'm sort of like, let's dig into that because it's probably not,
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, because I think hearing you talk about the fact that like, hey, once you played sport, you become a coach. It's like, geez, how many of them, right? Strength Coach Network. How many times do you think that maybe that's been the reality of why people become strength and conditioning coaches?
I think the thing is as well is like, I'm not saying it's like a cop out or like, do you know what I mean? It's just, it's the path of least resistance. And all I'm saying is like, what if you had all the options? You might still end up there. And that's cool. That's ideal if you explored everything. But yeah, going and playing rugby and then becoming a coach at the club that you were playing rugby at. I don't know.
No, like it sounds like you're essentially saying like, hey, just don't be afraid to kind of explore and see what you do want to do because
and
you
the thing
never
about being a professional athlete is you've typically got a lot of time to do that. So like when I had injuries, like I was plagued with injuries, and every time I was injured, I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I was so bored. It was like an ongoing joke about how injured I was the whole time, right? But I got so bored because there's only so many coffees you can go for. There's only so many physio treatments you can have. Like, so in the end, I just started, like, I built a website. I started writing. I was doing some work for a software company. Not because I necessarily, like, thought, oh shit, I've got to earn the money or whatever. It was just, I was so bored. I was like, I need to do something. And so you kind of have got the luxury of an athlete to begin exploring this stuff at the same time. And I think, it's quite lazy advice to say, oh, go and get some work experience. Because it's like, well, in what? And that's where the course comes in. Because you're like, if you can understand what you care about and what you value, it will refine down the kind of things you can go get some work experience in. And the kind of things you can explore. Yeah.
What's the ways that people, how do they get they've been listening to us now talk for 40 minutes. How do they find out more about this program? How do they get enrolled?
Yeah, so it's tacklingtransition.com. Very simple. You go on. There's kind of an intro video that kind of explains what it's all about. Bit of some bios, and then there's like there's a sample lesson that you can access, and you can kind of get to grips with the content of the course. And then also, I'm posting pretty regularly, like mainly on LinkedIn at the moment, but I'm going to start sort of moving to Instagram a little bit as well. Just some snippets, so some previews of the discussions. So trying to surface some of that content so people can kind of get to grips with the kind of things we're talking about. And they're all things that should resonate. The thing about this is that it doesn't matter like how you're retiring, like it's relevant. Like it doesn't matter whether you feel like you're not experiencing any like each of the 7 modules, you might think, oh, that doesn't apply to me. You're like, it does. And even if it's you saying, I now know it doesn't apply to me, then you move forward, right? So yeah, tacklingtransition.com, and everything's on there. And then I'm just on socials talking about it a fair amount. Nicholas talking on socials a fair amount. Yeah, that's that.
One last question I had as you were talking about it. Do you think playing and kind of like easing the transition from, like you said, high level, awesome pro, like, playing some lower level or even club for, my population of, if you were in, the NFL, or if you were in, the Power 5 football, and then you start to play some, lower level community with friends, does that help, or does that almost like, it doesn't really scratch the itch?
Yes, that's exactly what I did, basically. So I was full-time, and then I dropped down to being part-time in the same league, and then I dropped down a league, and I built my business. So it's pretty much the perfect way to do it, basically, is because you remove that sudden change. Like the sudden change is the big danger, and it just buys you time. So I was very lucky. Like when I quit being full-time rugby, I went to part-time, but that paid me enough that meant I didn't have to get a decent job. So I got a shit job in London. I say shit in terms of like the pay was terrible, but I didn't need it because I had the money from rugby, where I could train 2 nights a week and play on a Saturday. And that made financial sense as 2 things. So what that did was it allowed me to explore, it was very, very lucky really. Like it allowed me to explore building a career while also tapering off the rugby. And then it's ridiculous because the last 7 years that I played, so I played 15 years, the whole second half of my career was...
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.